This is The Blockchain Show. The Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies and promotes widespread adoption of cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hey folks, this is episode number 48. The blokes are back in town. Mark joins us from Blockchain Live 2017 in London.
News and events, what's been happening over the last month? I think for me, what's been interesting around the Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin side of things is that they are acting a bit like stocks and people are using them like that. And what I'm doing is actually watching the prices of them, but watching the prices drop for all the coins at the same time, which means they're reacting to something happening. And in this case, it was the Chinese government effectively banning them. Which, of course, a lot of people have invested in and are worried about. But I'm sure that they're going to pick up it again. And I know that you said before, Mark, that everybody's speculating that Bitcoin is going to hit $10,000 per Bitcoin by the end of the year. And what are your thoughts, Mark?
Right. Yeah, I think the strap line was around something like, well, Bitcoin may reach $5,000 by the end of this year. Well, it kind of bust that a few months ago, or a month or so ago. And then everybody reset the ceiling, I guess, to Bitcoin will hit $10,000 by the end of the year, or Bitcoin will eventually hit $500,000 at some point in its life, whereby people are talking about, well, actually that's because the dollar is being devalued rather than Bitcoin increased in value. So yeah, it is interesting. Even me, a relative newcomer to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency speculation, to see how that kind of changes over a period of months. And yeah, the Cryptogeddon that came the other week as a result of the Chinese government putting a ban on the exchanges, yes, that was another influential factor as to the inherent value of cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin in particular, Ether and Litecoin and a few of the other top 10. But it has bounced back. I think I saw an interesting statistic saying something like 2014, so it's only kind of 2-3 years ago, there were 90% of the Bitcoin exchanges were based in China. So if we'd have had that effect of Chinese government banning them then that would have been a massive deal. I think now something like between 10 and 15% of the crypto exchanges are based in China. So yeah, it'll have an impact, but it won't mean that there's no crypto exchanges that none of us outside of China can't operate. And that's, I guess, the beauty of the blockchain effect and computing effect is that, yes, one country may choose to withdraw its participation by turning on the Great Firewall of China, but that doesn't actually affect the whole world as much anymore. And so yeah, there's a lot of people talking about when you get those events, then's the time to buy and hold. If you've got spare fiat cash hanging around, buy a little bit more currency and see what it does in a week or two.
I think the other thing, if people are thinking about investing and they're worried about sort of events like that, this is the cryptocurrency is just doing exactly what a normal currency or normal stock would do. That it will plummet quickly and then it will slowly gain. It's not often you see stocks gaining, and if stocks do gain quickly, then that's usually a warning sign to people. So no, there's nothing unusual. And if you are investing and you have got money invested, then don't worry. I'm sure that things are going to be back to normal in a couple of weeks as we get used to the world being normal and events like this happen. And I think that the cryptocurrencies will recover and carry on climbing steadily. I don't think this is anything to worry about, like you said, Mark. But it is an interesting statistic. Like you say, if this happened many years ago, 2014, then we'd be in a very, very different situation.
Sure. Something else that's happening this week, which I'm particularly interested in, I'm going to try and participate in my first initial coin offering. So people may have heard the term ICOs, which are kind of the crypto world's version of IPOs. you get in stock offerings. And yeah, so I think it's tomorrow. I'm going to try and participate in my first one. I mainly traded in the already launched coins so far and through the exchanges, but there is an ICO for an organisation called the TIES, TIES .network, which is interesting enough for me to want to speculate a little bit, to buy a few of their initial coins if I can and see what that happens. Again, going back to our previous conversations, have a bit of fun, see what that ICO is about, see what ICO is about in general, and see what I can learn from that experience. So that's one I'm interested in for this week.
I can't wait to see what happens with that one. It sounds like something quite interesting.
It is. I mean, the concept. Well, I kind of hesitated from ICOs before because there's a lot of FUD around them, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And are you just throwing your money away and those ICOs could fail? And it's kind of worthless speculation and people rip you off. Yeah, that might happen. But this one sounds an interesting enough concept that's behind the ICO. I think they've sort of pitched it as LinkedIn on the blockchain, whereby you can kind of verify and validate your working credentials, your work history through blockchain ledger. And so that technology and the supporting technology was interesting enough for me to say, yeah, I could see myself on that in a 6 months, a year's time as a means of publishing my skills and history and work history. So it's worth keeping an eye on it, worth speculating a bit and seeing what happens in the next 3 to 6 months. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one.
I think that's really interesting because if we see the likes of social media, we've got Facebook there, where there are people we semi-trust and we trust they are those people that look like their photograph. Then we've got LinkedIn, which is a bit more trustworthy because we know who these people are and we have all of their personal details up there, and of course friends and colleagues. But now we're talking about a more secure, shall we say, way of networking with business contacts, and you've got the inherent trust built in because of that blockchain technology behind it.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like loading your work history onto the blockchain. So rather than you saying that you were at these organizations doing these roles, actually you will have through a smart contract and through logging that on a blockchain on a ledger somewhere, there is that proof going back through the history that you can actually prove you've got those credentials, those skills and experience, and that should make you a more valuable asset for your next role or one of your next roles going forward. And I think there's even more kind of interesting stuff on the back of that. Once there's a big enough network of people on the TIES network, then I think they're talking about a kind of new style of companies, a new style of project teams, how you could kind of contract together as a group of individuals to using the blockchain ledger to kind of hold that together, and you almost kind of incorporate yourself as a virtual temporary company for the duration of that piece of work, facilitated through that TIES network. So again, in my personal working circumstances as an independent, self-employed guy, that's interesting. It would be interesting to be able to collaborate with other like-minded and like positioned individuals to become a virtual organisation for the duration of that piece of work, and then unincorporate safely. We each go our separate ways and enter that back on the blockchain and see what happens next. So again, not only the ICO as a thing that I'm kind of interested in seeing what these ICOs are all about, but actually the technology, the use case of that technology interests me enough to keep an eye on it.
That's pretty phenomenal. And this is something Microsoft started talking about, in 2001, where you have self-electing project teams. This is almost self-electing companies that can spring up, do something, and then you can close it off. And it also means that recruitment doesn't really come into it because you recruit the people you want and you trust them. Therefore, that information's true and correct. So that that would mean that going forward, that you almost create a company to do a project or to do a piece of work, and then you can close that down very quickly.
As long as they get rid of all those emails from LinkedIn, I'm on board.
Exactly. And that's the problem. We all complain about too much email, but we've also got the problem of fear of missing out, that we might miss something if we do unsubscribe. It's interesting. Okay, what are we going to do? What's subject of the day?
So something I've picked up on in the past few weeks, past month or so, is the IOTA network or IOTA solution that they call the Tangle, which is sort of a non-linear blockchain technology, as best I can describe it, that kind of does away, sort of tackles some of the inherent problems with blockchain approaches. And they specifically launched this for Internet of Things usage, but I guess it also has potential for other use cases as well.
Why would you do this? What are those inherent problems you see with the blockchain today?
One of the issues that IOTA are saying is there with blockchain, and specifically from an Internet of Things use case perspective, is dealing with micropayments. If you are using micropayments to kind of validate a transaction on a blockchain, then it costs money, ether, gas, whatever your cryptocurrency of choice is, to process that transaction. And I think what the IOTA and the Tangle is kind of saying is, well, actually, some of the transactions you might want to process, if it's in the Internet of Things space, are going to be so micro, so tiny in their value, that you'll actually spend more money on the validation of the transaction than you will what the transaction's worth, if that makes sense. So if it's an Internet of Things application, you've got your smart car, you've got your smart thermostat for your house, or whatever it is, it almost costs too much to process that on a standard blockchain or traditional blockchain, if it's just sending a readout of whatever that temperature is, or whatever the mileage that smart car has done. So what they're kind of saying is, well, that's a bit silly. Why are you spending more money than the transaction is worth just to validate it? There must be a better way. So to deal with that kind of micro payments situation that you get with Internet of Things, I think what they've said is they generate all of the value, all of the tokens, if you like, for the IOTA network up front when they created the Genesis block of the IOTA network, so that there are no miners who therefore want the fee for doing the mining, which does the proof of work, proof of stake stuff in traditional blockchains. So you kind of cut out that middleman who's waiting to take some money off you before he validates your transaction. But what you are doing instead, so you've got rid of that miner who's doing the validation. You become a validator yourself. And I think what the IOTA Tangle sort of is based on is saying, well, everybody participates in this web, this mesh, this tangle of a network. And if you want one of your transactions validated, what you've got to kind of agree to is to validate 2 other transactions when you do that. So it's a kind of a self-supporting network, Tangle, that means you're not in it for the money. You're not in it as a miner to cream off from somebody else's transaction. You're in it. You want to support the network. You want to support the validation across the Tangle. So therefore, you will go out of your way by doing some extra processing of somebody else's transactions in order to almost to pay for your transaction validation. So that was an interesting kind of concept for me. Still trying to get my head around it, but yeah, it's trying to deal with issues around speed, around scale, around reliability that some of the traditional blockchains, and certainly Bitcoin and Ether to a certain perspective, are starting to show, and deal with those problems in an innovative way.
I was going to. Do you think that the future of blockchain is getting rid of miners as we know them?
I think that is one possibility. there are other ways that people are trying to deal with some of those issues by maybe taking some of the transactions off chain, and they, they're processing them through some of the other means. That's interesting in itself, and there's plenty of other organisations kind of doing that. There's the Raiden network is starting to prove some of that. Plasma, I think that Vitalik Buterin and others have started talking about recently of let the blockchain do what it does well, but actually take some of the transaction work off the blockchain and then plumb it back into the blockchain at the most appropriate time. So that's an interest. Is another way of tackling the same issue. Yeah, could the Tangle be the next blockchain? Probably not blockchain 2.0. It might be blockchain 3.0. So again, worth keeping an eye on. I'm trying to find out more about it myself and keep a watchful eye on it. But it could be the next best thing.
Very cool.
Yes, I think that's quite important, because as we move in society more towards a subscription-based model for buying things, and especially Internet of Things, where you're using a bit of cloud processing, for example, for your control of your Internet of Things or communication or storage, it does make sense that you can actually go down to those micropayments. And that then gives you transparency around where all your costs are for your Internet of Things. Instead of subscribing to a service, if you can do micropayments without the overhead of actually dealing with those transactions, then you can split down the costs to down even into individual database storage costs, for example, per bit of data, which then makes transparency for customers a lot easier. But again, you're generating more data around the data, which then becomes self-defeating. So it's where would you end with those micropayments? But as long as there's a platform to do it, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I think there are there are a number of ways of skinning those. We're at the beginning stages of kind of blockchain technology in the mainstream. It's probably not even in the mainstream right now, which is, I guess, one of the most exciting things about it. We're all of us on this podcast and people are listening. We're all in the same boat. We all have the opportunity to participate and learn and grow as use of blockchain perpetuates and grows itself. But as it's starting to gain momentum, to go into the mainstream problems starting to appear, and people are having to come up with new and novel techniques for dealing with those problems that weren't there before, because we didn't know they were there before. So yeah, this kind of different types of networking that tackle some of these issues are interesting. The side loading of stuff off chain is interesting, and it would be good to see how these develop and which ones kind of take hold quickest and are most popular. There are a number of organisations that hearing today at Blockchain Live, who are looking at that problem in slightly different ways and coming up with their own solutions to it. So yeah, really interesting to see which ones get the most support.
Is this a bit like the internet boom in the early 90s, when everybody was throwing money at websites and there wasn't much to substantiate what was going on? Or do you think this is more controlled, where people are finding use cases and they're seeing that blockchain is the answer?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, there is probably that. Early internet, probably before the .com boom of the late 90s, early 2000s. It's the pre-boom, where there is just an explosion of opportunities of. I don't know if people have watched the program Halt and Catch Fire, which is on its 4th series at the moment, and that 4th series is about how the number of websites have exploded since the internet kind of launched, since the World Wide Web launched, and the problems that then created was, well, there's no index to how to find a website, and so the smart guys in the industry got involved in search engines and portals. So your Yahoos and your I guess early Googles of this world were heavily investigating and investing in how the heck do we index all of these websites that keep growing and growing and growing on a daily basis. So yeah, I think we're in a similar kind of stage with blockchain technology. There are a lot of problems out there that we probably don't know how to come up with a solution for them. Some of those solutions will be using blockchain tech, but sometimes we'll find that it's not the right solution, and we'll quickly move on, I guess. But yeah, I think there will be enough of those solutions that are based on blockchain and distributed ledger that it will take hold.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering, are you a blockchain adopter, a blockchain explorer, or a blockchain enabler today?
Today I'm an explorer, but that was mainly because I couldn't get here till later on in the day, and I thought it wasn't worth. I didn't really need to see the 9 o'clock sessions. So yeah, I've been here as an explorer and here listening and then talking to people in the kind of the networking session. So yeah, exploring. I'm not. I was very, very tempted to become an adopter and go and get a lunch out of it. But actually, I was just here to really listen. Certainly, we've had the guys from IOTA presenting, so that's helped me understand it a little bit more. And there's been a few other interesting presentations. That EOS, I think there was another one that's interesting today, and Golem Network. That's another interesting one that I heard about today. All of them trying to come up with their own solutions to some of the new issues that we're starting to see as blockchains become more adopted. It's been around a while, certainly been in development for a while, and I think that was one of the jokes that the presenter was making. Was, when's it going to be live? Well, it'll be live. It'll be live when it's ready. Don't pin me down to a particular date. So yeah, I think that has been in development for at least a year. So yeah, I would imagine that you and Steve would have spoken to them, because it's an interesting concept, a kind of sharing and an exchanging of free compute resource on your computer, my computer, XYZ organisations, mainframes and what have you. How to free that capacity up and share it to people who are willing to buy it. It's the evolution of cloud computing, I guess, blended in with some old school sharing of PCs, like through BitTorrent technology and things like the SETI initiative. We talked about that last time. How you can provide some of your compute power to search for extraterrestrial life. Well, this time you can give it to anybody who wants to pay for it, so that they can use your spare CPU cycles or spare memory as you see fit to charge them. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Again, I can see potential for that, and we'll wait with bated breath for their beta release to come out.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you for calling from that event. That's really awesome of you, both of you guys, for being willing.
Hopefully the sound quality is good, because I'm kind of standing outside the event, because it's very busy and there's a lot of people chatting, so yeah, I've had to step outside to make myself heard.
It's real, it's live, it's happening. So Mark, just another thing. I'm quite interested, because I've not been lucky enough to go to a blockchain event. Is it full of geeky people? Is it full of finance people? And what is the sort of mood? Are people excited or interested or perplexed?
So I've been going to events probably. So the first one I went to was in January this year, and that was, there was probably more geeky people at that event, me being probably one of them. But a lot of technology people and a lot of questions have been posed at a real technical level. I think over the past couple of months I've been to a couple of other events and starting to get into more kind of business conversations. So it's not just us geeks There are finance and fintech people here because that's where I guess blockchain solutions have been initially pitched. Because it's been proven to work so well with cryptocurrencies, therefore it kind of lends itself well to the finance world. But I think we've got government here today. There's a guy I put a pin down for a chat. I've not actually bumped into him yet. Who's working on how to innovate and implement this type of technology within UK government. There is a real blend, I think, of people wearing ties and suits to people wearing jeans and trainers, and everything in between. And there's IBM here today, so most of them are in shirt and tie and suits. And then there are some real startup type organisations who have got a very tiny stand and who are happy to chat with anyone who passes by. So that's the people presenting and people in the show and the in the networking event. The crowds of people again kind of reflect that. There's a real blend of people interested in the finance side, I imagine, and people interested in other applications of it. So I think it is, even in the past 9 months since the first show I went to, it's sort of evolving and changing, and people, it's starting to go mainstream.
Yeah, I can understand that. And if IBM are putting their weight behind it, then it must be something quite important. Are they doing a lot of advertising? Have they sponsored the show?
I think they are one of the, not the main sponsor perhaps, but certainly one of the named partners. And yes, they're here with a fairly large stand, and they have some nice printed literature and free handouts and stuff like that, as you would imagine IBM would do. Picked up the blockchain for dummies guide that they're handing out for free. I'll see how much of it I know later on tonight. It's interesting to see the different types of organisation. The main sponsor is the EOS, EOS.io, and they I think are coming up with a blockchain solution to file storing and to sharing files. I think the guy who wrote Steam It is their CTO, so he's here today. He did the presentation here today. There's a real interesting mix of people and companies involved in it.
This seems like there's beer too, right?
There may be some beer. but hey, it's approaching 5 o'clock here, so I'm allowed.
Yeah, it's at a place called the Brewery, so.
It is. It's the old Whitbread Brewery in London's financial district. So yeah, there's a lot of cobblestones. You can imagine, kind of big horses with pulling carts of beer in there, going back 100 years or so. So it's an interesting place.
Is this a one-day event, or is it going on tomorrow?
So this one is a one-day event. Talking of events, Seamless Link. The next one I'm due to go on, I think, is in November, December time, and that's a 2-day event here in central London. But yeah, they seem to be by different organisations. So this one's different to the different organisation who did it. The one I went to in January. So there's enough different organisers who kind of give it a different dynamic each time, I guess. You'll get different range of speakers and different presentation styles and different venues. I don't want to make an industry out of attending these shows just for the fun of it, but it's interesting to see the crowd of people and see how they change over time, and still see some of the same faces as well. But yeah, I'll be coming back to a show in a couple of months' time. That's going to be a 2-day affair.
I'm impressed.
It's time out of my day job, I guess, and it's something I'm willing to find that time and spend the time doing because I find it interesting and I find it exciting how it is changing and how many opportunities seem to be coming, and I'm I'm pretty confident that some of those opportunities will come my way once I've got a firm enough grip on the situation.
Yeah, it looks like you got the full services there: financial, public, energy, retail, tech, healthcare.
Yep. There's people. Health records is something that's been in the news in the UK quite a lot over the past years. Are our health records safe, and how do we know that they're safe? Is the NHS or their suppliers looking after them? The National Health Service, that is. There's some organisations here who have blockchain-based solutions to some of those problems. I don't think they're the panacea. I don't think it's going to fix all the problems, but as I think I've said before, it's a useful tool to have in your box and to have at your disposal, and it is applicable to some of those problems. But not a silver bullet, but it's a useful tool.
Yeah, seems like there's a lot of momentum.
I think so, and I think London particularly is a good place for this sort of thing. We're quite important in the global finance community. So you've got a lot of fintech guys, financial tech guys living in and around London, and they have good brains and can apply themselves to financial solutions. And they're starting to look at blockchain as one of the options that they can bring to the table for their big bank customers and insurance customers. We've got a lot of government people in and around London as well at the moment, and again, they can apply their government-focused brain. That's kind of where I've come from fairly recently. I came out of government a couple of years ago, so I understand a little bit about some of the problems the UK government is facing. And I can see how blockchain solutions could help fix some of those problems. Cool. So, great to speak to you again, Ethan, and always good to hear from you, Ian. Hope you're all well, and hope Orlando is recovering.
Oh, Orlando's recovering. We're just waiting for Maria to blow in now. It's just about to devastate Puerto Rico.
Well, good luck. I'm sure you'll batten down the hatches.
Yeah, man. Stay safe.
Absolutely, and you guys. And speak to you very, very soon.
Cool.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Catch you later.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mark. Cheers.
Bye.
Are you looking for an easy way to buy Bitcoin or Ether on a safe, secure platform? Coinbase is the easiest place to buy and sell digital currencies. Sign up today as a friend of the Blockchain Show, and if you buy or sell $100 of Bitcoin or more, you'll earn $10 of free Bitcoin for yourself and $10 of Bitcoin to support this show. Join now using the link in this episode's show notes at theblockchainshow.com. To learn more, visit theblockchainshow.com. Ledger Wallet is a smart card-based Bitcoin hardware wallet bringing maximum protection level to your Bitcoins without sacrificing usability or control. Find the link in this episode's show notes.